Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and I am being joined by an absolute legend in the gaming space. If you've tracked any of my BioWare coverage in the past, you know I've talked about this man quite a bit. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him once before over on Defining Duke. We're sitting down here for a one-on-one chat talking about BioWare, the state it's in now, also the history, the tremendous history you have there, talking about games industry economy, tips for new game developers. I'm joined by none other than Mark Darrah. Mark, how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
Awesome. Great to have you here, man. Just a lot to go over here today. First, I want to just check in on with your history because to prepare for these interviews, I like to go through everyone's entire, Moby games and just see like how many things you've executive produced, directed, programmed. You have a lot of time spent on all these different games. So I'm just curious if you have a favorite game, what that would be and why it would be that one in particular.
Do you mean a favorite game that I worked on, or just?
Well, actually, that'd be fun too, just to hear what your favorite game in general is. But yeah, a favorite game you worked on too.
Yeah. So I usually answer that question this way. I think the game that I'm most proud of, the resulting game, is Dragon Age Inquisition. It is the one where we set out with a pretty clear vision and we executed pretty well to what we were trying to do. In terms of the project I was most proud of, in a lot of ways, I would say that's probably Dragon Age 2. Not because it's the best game I've ever done, but because it was done under such tight constraints. And
Sure.
and I'm really proud of what we were able to do in the time we had. My favorite team was the Sonic Chronicles team. I just have a love affair with the smaller team size, that the ability to have a team that you know everyone on.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a talking point, I think, later, just with how the industry's grown so much, huge teams. That's really interesting. Just on the note of Dragon Age 2, that's a game that I feel I didn't appreciate nearly as much as I felt I should have at launch. But until you really started to share that story of the conditions you and your team worked under to get that game out the door, that like understanding what you had to go through to get it out, really increased my appreciation of what it was doing. Because at first it felt like the outcast, but then it fits in just right, you know?
Yeah, I do think that a lot of the problem with Dragon Age 2's reception at launch is um, we didn't adequately prepare people for the change. So I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's been able to repair its reputation over time, is when people come and look at it 5, 10, what are we now, 14 years later, they're able to say, okay, I'm going to look at it with fresh eyes and let it stand on its own. And I think it's just when you came up and we called it Dragon Age 2 and we said, compare this directly to Dragon Age Origins. And then people look at it and are like, well, this sure isn't Dragon Age Origins 2, which it isn't. But we didn't do a good job of preparing people for that fact.
Yeah, I understand that. But it's interesting how Dragon Age as a franchise has evolved, where a lot of its lack of identity, in some sense, beyond just being a fantasy role-playing series, kind of became its identity. Because each one, you had Origins to Inquisition, all doing similar but yet very different things. Was that ever always the plan, or do you guys just kind of start, because you talk about how happy you were with Inquisition, you obviously were at the top with Dragon Age 2. Is that always the plan with each of these games, or they just kind of, when you gave birth to them, they just became their own thing?
Dragon Age Origins originally was intended as a standalone game. It actually, you can see this if you play Dragon Age Origins, knowing that it was intended to stand alone. You can kind of see that in Dragon Age Origins. There's a lot of threads that are cast out that kind of had to be abandoned because there could be werewolves all over the world. There might be a civil war in the happening in underground in Orzammar. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that's just like was great to put out in a game that you never had to come back to. But then when we did come back to it, you had to sort of recover from that. The problem that Dragon Age has had, charitably, I guess, would be to say that EA wants mainstream success, and it's hard, or at least it has historically been hard, for corporate people who come from the sports side of the organization to look at a game like Dragon Age Origins, which is super nerdy, not very attractive looking, and say, "Oh, this is a mainstream game." They don't see it. They look at Mass Effect, they can see it. So there's just been a lot of difficulty with them. There's always been a push for it to be more mainstream, more accessible, and so it's always had this either pressure to be something different, or in the case of something like Inquisition, a reaction to that. It's like we got way out over our skis in Dragon Age 2. We got to pull back to something that's a little bit closer to a traditional CRPG. So it's been kind of wobbling back and forth a lot, trying to reach out and then pulling back when it's gotten ahead of itself.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about EA in just a moment here. I actually want to go back to what you mentioned about Origins. I didn't know that about the game, that it was intended to be a standalone. I gotta get my BioWare fan card revoked at this point, because I did not know that.
I don't know that it's something that we've really ever talked about.
Okay. So yeah, my question on that is then, what made you guys want to keep going forward with it, right? Because EA published Origins, and maybe this was a different EA back then, but they published this nerdy RPG that many of us adore, and you guys decide to carry it forward. Was it just like simple business, like, hey, this did really well, let's do more of this?
It's pretty much that.
Okay, cool.
It's pretty much financial reasons more than anything. And I think that the franchise has been much more forward looking ever since then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, let's get into some of these other, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I provided Mark a bunch of actually planned questions, and just hit you with like none that I prepared you for. So I appreciate you playing ball with me here. The one I really wanted to get into is, as someone who's covered BioWare for a while, there's been just a lot of reports that fly in and out of the studio, just given the recent development cycles between like Andromeda, Anthem, Veilgard, and Jason Schreier of Bloomberg did publish a piece about Veilguard's development cycle. And he did mention how, I found this to be kind of the real shocker in the mix of the story, is that there was a feeling within some of the BioWare team that there was priority from EA for the Mass Effect team versus the Dragon Age team. And as someone who's been there really since the start, since the glow up, right, where Baldur's Gate 2, 1998, right? So did you feel like, as someone who's really been a strong part of the Dragon Age franchise, did you feel like that was reflected in your time on the team?
I definitely felt like Dragon Age was having a lot of difficulty getting the resources that it needed to move forward after Inquisition. Some of that is EA doesn't like spending money, and so I think one of the things that's different about BioWare compared to most of the other studios within EA's umbrella is we tried to do multiple things at the same time. And so even if you look at like DICE, basically they're just doing one thing at a time, and sometimes that does really well, and sometimes it doesn't do so well. But that umbrella of people is the size that it is, and they can push it to make it bigger very slowly. But when you're doing 2, 3, 5 things at a time, if you want to do multiple things at the same time, you need to be big. And what was happening was a lot of cannibalization. I think one of the reasons that Casey probably left in 2014 was because he was leading Anthem. Dragon Age was taking up all of the people. And then the thing that was coming next was Andromeda. And he could see the writing on the wall that he was going to not get any people either. So was Mass Effect did EA like Mass Effect better than Dragon Age? I think they did. Was that the cause of Dragon Age not getting the people that it needed? That I'm not as certain about. I think that might just be the structure of BioWare and the fiscal conservatism of EA not quite meshing together properly. But we reported into part of the sports organization, which is hilarious.
Oh, wow.
And at one point, like in 20, so I'm like, that red book that's behind me there. Where is it? Right there. Okay. That was a book that was made to basically send within the EA organization to say, Dragon Age is a thing. Don't forget about us. We're trying to get people. Please let us hire people. Let us get people.
Wow.
And in early 2017, I talked to the person who, like, the studio reported into. He was amazed I hadn't quit a year earlier, because we weren't getting the people.
So it was a real uphill battle. I know something you've talked about. By the way, I should shout it out. You have a phenomenal YouTube channel, Darrah on Games. People should check it out. And over there, you talked about how BioWare over time had just kind of slimmed their project focus. Do you think that's for the better then, given your struggle with gathering resources, or do you think there was another answer during your time there?
I do think that. So I've thought about this a lot, and I think within EA, you're better off being one game at a time. When you look, when people think like, why, this is going to be highly simplified, but when people think, okay, Battlefield 4 shipped, and it was really rocky at launch, and DICE spent the time and the resources necessary to fix that game up. Sims 4 launched and had a really rocky launch. Same thing. The studio spent the time to fix it up and make it great. Those two studios had nothing else. If Battlefield 4 wasn't working, you basically had to shut the studio down. If Sims 4 wasn't working, you basically had to shut Maxis down. With BioWare, if Andromeda isn't working, there are two other projects desperate for those people. So I think EA does not like failure and is eager to move on from failure. But if there's nothing else, the studio is saying, no, we can fix this. But if the studio isn't saying that, it's not that Dragon Age and Anthem were just desperate to chew up all of the Andromeda people after Andromeda had trouble at launch, but they also weren't actively saying, if you don't let us do this, we're going to have to fire 150 people. They were saying, well, we got jobs for them. Highly simplified.
Yeah.
But I do think that, given that, I think that, yeah, within EA, BioWare is better off being one game at a time, 100% of their talent focused on doing one game at a time. No rivalries between the different projects. No fighting over resources. It's just like, we're all in on one thing. Maybe there's a back burner tiny thing, but not 2 or 3 or 4 entire project lines in open warfare over resources.
Okay, interesting. So as someone who's been there since the start, and you've seen, you've been there when you're a 3-project team, then a 2-project team, then I guess, and this is just your opinion as someone who's worked there and you don't work there anymore, but is this something where you think this is going to be better for the team? Like, a lot of people look forward like at the next Mass Effect, and it's like, is your expectation like this should be less messy maybe compared to prior development cycles? Obviously not casting this on them one way or the other, but just from your experience and the outside looking in.
I do think this is less messy. I do think that also, to be frank, the Mass Effect team is going to be able to point to the Veilguard and say, we should steer away from some of these things because look what happened. So I do think, and I would honestly encourage that team to scapegoat Veilguard as much as they need to get what they need from the organization.
It is,
whether it's true or not, just because I do think it's going to be less messy, I think, is the best way. Is it
okay?
We are in a world. The problem with being single project is you have this sort of boom and bust thing happening, where it's like you get really big and then you have to slim down. Now EA seems to be trying to move to some sort of model where people flow within the overall organization a lot more. So maybe that will be fine. Maybe that'll work out great, but it remains to be seen.
Got it. On that note, then, Inquisition, as you've documented on your Twitter account, best-selling BioWare game of all time, 12+ million copies sold, Game of the Year winner, and yet EA seems inclined to want to make Mass Effect the primary focus for BioWare's future. And I think after Veilguard and just the reception and the conversation, like you mentioned, the scapegoating, it makes a lot of sense. But if there is a future for Dragon Age, what do you think that is? Or is there one really at all?
I'm not sure who pitches that game within EA. That's what it
Mm.
would come down to. There would need to be
Mm.
someone at BioWare, or potentially someone within EA more broadly, that would be willing to go out on a limb and say, I want to pitch another Dragon Age game. Here's my vision of it. I think there are more games to be made there, but I'm not sure how it gets started right now.
Yeah. It feels like the arc really concluded with Veilguard. So as a fan, I would say I would like to just see the reset button hit. I think a lot of people would be more open to that rather than a continuation. Would you kind of align with that, or like where would you ideally take it in a perfect world? If you're able to answer that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pitching a Dragon Age to EA right now, so yeah, I don't know what I'd want to do, to be honest, to go forward with it. I mean, I honestly think they should do. I don't think they will, but I think they should do a remaster of the first three. I mean, one of the things that we pitched at one point, pretty softly, so pitch is a massive overstatement, was to kind of retroactively rebrand the first three games as if they were a trilogy. And call it like the Champions trilogy. So you have these sort of big, larger than life heroes. You've got the hero Ferelden. You've got the like what Kirkwall. What is this?
Whatever
we call Hawk.
And then
you've got you've got the Inquisitor. So I think maybe you do that as a first step, is take those three games, and maybe Veilgard. But you take those three games, you shine them up, you re-release them, probably remaster, probably not a remake. See what happens, and then maybe go from there. I'm very curious to see, in a weird, twisted way, the Mass Effect franchise and the Dragon Age franchise kind of are in similar states, where they have a trilogy of games that are pretty well received, and then a fourth game that's less well received. And I'll be curious to see what Mass Effect does with Mass 5. Is like how does Andromeda fit in there? Like, what is, I don't know. I mean, I've seen the same stuff you've seen, so I don't know what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat, man. On that note of what we call as a community, the Dragon Age Legendary Edition, right? Like what you guys basically did for Mass Effect so badly. I was trying to champion on the channel. I was like, you got to do it for Dragon Age. So it's very interesting to hear that you guys, I mean, you said soft pitch, so like I don't want to carry it like a mile further than that, but like, why wasn't that like a hard press? Was it just not like an urgent thing? Because I feel like as a fan, when we walked away from Andromeda, we walked away from Anthem, I think a lot of people forgot what BioWare did so well. And then Legendary Edition for Mass Effect comes around, and there was that first time in a while, it was like positivity, optimism around BioWare and their games. And I was like, oh, I think people kind of forgot. And so I wondered if Dragon Age Legendary Edition would be the next obvious step. So was there a reason why that wasn't pressed any harder internally?
EA's historically been, and I don't really know why, but they've even said this publicly, they're kind of against remasters. I don't really know why. It's strange for a publicly traded company to basically seem to be against free money, but they seem to be against it. So, but that's part of it. The other problem is that Dragon Age is harder than Mass Effect to do, and to some degree unknowably harder. Maybe only a little bit harder. Maybe a lot harder. I mean, we had various, like one of the very earliest things for, I guess Joplin. I think it was Joplin. Was like let's do a version. Let's do Frostbite tools. So let's make, and then let's find a mod house that seems talented and just uplift them and pay them to do a remake of Dragon Age Origins. Like there were lots of pitches around like, is there a way we can bring Dragon Age Origins forward? And depending on what you do, like a remaster, you kind of get Dragon Age 2 for free. A remake, you don't. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, man, that as a fan, that's so tough to hear, because I'm like, it's great to know at least BioWare proper knew that's what a lot of people were really looking for. It's a shame that it seems like EA was sort of serving as a blocker with what they seek in their portfolio.
And to some degree, I mean, the studios run their financials within themselves. So, I mean, I think to some degree, EA's stance was probably, sure, go ahead and do it, but do it with the money you already have. And it's like, well, we can't do it with the money that we already have because we're doing all these other things. Yeah, one of the advantages that Mass Effect has for a remaster over Dragon Age, well, I mean, a bunch of advantages. One, it's all Unreal instead of 2 different engines. But actually, just the fact that it's Unreal means that you can remaster Mass Effect essentially for money. If you're willing to spend money on it, you can go to an external house and they can do most of the work, which is sort of what happened with Legendary Edition. There were a bunch of people at BioWare working on it, but it was, well, I don't remember how many, but it was not a ton. Whereas if you're going to do Mass Effect, you basically have to do it. You either have to spin up a brand new team that's going to learn this really, really crotchety old tech base, or you got to do it all in house. And that's harder because
it gets back to a bit of the resource war that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, like EA doesn't like spending money, but the thing that EA likes even less than spending money is hiring people permanently. Because
sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
But I mean, it's all public companies, right?
Yeah,
is like because money is money. It's like, okay, we spent $10 million to do this. It's a one-time thing, and that's it. We spent it, and we got $20 million back. Great, good spend. If I hire a person, that person's now a person I have to pay for forever. And EA knows that laying people off makes them look bad. And so, like, they don't want to do that if they don't have to. So they really don't like hiring people if they can avoid it. They'll do it, of course. I mean, they're a big company, but you can't really remaster Dragon Age externally. You have to probably do it internally.
Interesting. A bigger lift. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting insight there. All right, let's look a bit at Anthem here, because right now there's the whole Stop Killing Games initiative that's ongoing. I know you spoke about that a little bit. I watched your video on it, so we can get into that a bit. But with Anthem now, it's officially servers are being shut down. Even as someone who wasn't like a huge fan of Anthem, I do find myself always concerned with the games industry's ability to do away with any form of art, the best of it, the missteps, the licensed games. And I try not to live in a fully idealistic world, of like, man, we got to keep everything. Like, I get some of it goes, but I feel like it's an important part of BioWare's history. And so how do you wrestle with knowing something you spent a lot of time on goes away forever? No one can pick that up and touch it. They can sure go on YouTube and watch it, but I don't know. There's something that feels, and maybe it's because I've been working on my own stuff where I think about that idea of like, oh, it's just gone forever. It's just a piece of software. You delete it, goodbye. It just makes me sad when I think about this stuff. So how do you feel as someone who is working on this project?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to happen eventually. To be frank, I'm surprised it made it this long. I was always, I needed to capture footage because eventually I'm going to do a video on Anthem. And it's hilarious that I did my first stream of it, and then the next day they announced.
I thought you knew.
I did not know. Yeah, I totally caught me by surprise. So much funny. So that I was like, did they forget that Anthem existed? And I reminded them of, which of course is not true, because they would have been working on that language for months before. So it was totally coincidence.
That's amazing.
But so I always knew it was going to go away eventually. And like I talk about in the video on it, Anthem could have been built in a way where this wouldn't be necessary. Now, there are things that BioWare basically, like Destiny has very sophisticated bits of technology for host migration, and because Destiny's peer-to-peer. And we didn't know how to do that. And we frankly couldn't afford to do that, but we could have done something. But it would have been an uglier game, probably would have had more latency issues. Like, it would have been a worse experience second to second in order to get something that basically wouldn't need to ever be sunset. I think we all need to think about, is that the world we want? And kind of, I think maybe it is, that we want to be in a world where we're willing to sacrifice some fidelity sacrifice some things in order to get it so that games don't just vanish one day. I do believe in game preservation, and we're losing a lot of stuff right now.
Yeah.
Things are disappearing. I mean, people won't even. I mean, forget Anthem, which was at least up for almost 7 years. By the time it'll go down, it'll be almost 7 years. I mean, like I like. What about Concord? Like, I mean, there's
2 weeks.
Interesting in there's something interesting from a science perspective of being able to play Concord and go, what happened here? Like, but you're not gonna. It's gone. It's gone forever.
Yeah, like I try to always define game developers as like scientists, and I feel like it's obviously for a lot of players, they're like, they'll hear Concord and they'll be like, who gives a shit? And I'm like, well, I get that from the player angle, but like for those who are learning or studying, like having that product available to pick it up and be like, in the case of Concord, like a lot of people point to the character design. It's like you look at those characters and maybe they're aspiring character artists who look at that and go like, okay, let's see what went wrong here. What doesn't, like, you know, I think
these
you can
too generic.
And I think just, I always say like playing is believing. Like there's something different between just Google searching something versus putting your hands on it, messing around with it, hearing it, you know, everything coming together, because it's not ever just one facet that makes something bad.
Yeah. So all my feeling on Stop Killing Games is that, like, let's acknowledge that there are consequences to basically mandating that things not go away for forever, but maybe those are consequences that we want to pay. Like that we want to accept. I mean, like I said in the video, like we don't let chemical companies just flush their toxic waste into the nearest stream. There are consequences to us not letting them do it. It costs them money to not do that. But we've decided correctly as a society that that's a cost that we're willing to make them pay. And there is a line here somewhere where we're saying, yeah, you know what? We do want you to have to, well, at the very least, disclose something. Like I said, like I feel like I don't know. I don't know, because there's a bunch of different. There's games preservation. There's the educational part of it, and then there's customer rights protections, and they're all different. They all have slightly different answers, I feel. Yeah. If I told you when you bought Anthem, if it said on the box, the servers will go down no earlier than January 10th, 2026. I mean, people would have probably said, wow, the servers are going to be up for almost 7 years. That's amazing. And it's like, okay, so then it's like, that's more information than you've been getting in the past. That's good from a customer rights perspective. It doesn't solve the preservation or the educational side of it. So I don't know. So my feeling at the end of the day is we probably need something, and I just don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah, I saw a good theory on a game developer Reddit thread, and they said that changing some of the verbiage around the purchasing might help. Like you mentioned the servers, but also just like if I say we'll use Anthem, like it's a live service game,
right?
Subscribe or something along those lines.
I do think that we've the industry you can't. I think we're going to lose that, what we're doing right now, which is we tell you that you buy a game, but then you read the EULA and you clearly aren't. It's like, okay, pick one.
Yeah.
And maybe everyone is picking a different thing, but I suspect that, unfortunately, that if we force the big publishers to pick one, they're just going to pick license. And it's just going to say, you don't, and it's like, you license everything, including the single player things. And then maybe it's worse.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you know, I have Veilguard questions, but I want to just stick with this for a little bit here, because the industry is at what I would call like a major crossroads. You know, funding, game sales, layoffs, consolidation, AI, game prices. You know, a lot of hot button topics. And I want to know what you think about the current economy for games. Right, you've been part of this since '98. You've seen the ups, the downs. Are you feeling concerns like others, or I've seen some argue like it's regulating a bit. I've seen others saying platform holders such as Xbox are doing a bit of, say, chasing for that, you know, that next like Fortnite. You know, they're all looking for those. I call them the black hole games, the sinister sticks. Like they just grab these like one game and it just absorbs millions and millions each month. There's also the indie side, which I call them a bit of unicorn hunters right now. A lot of them are just looking for their next Balatro. Like I spent this much and I got that much. So where do you kind of fall when it comes to the general economy of games, seeing it grow and change so much.
I mean, last year it was survive till 25, and this year is definitely put the lie to that, because it's more brutal this year than last year from everything that I can see. Last year it seemed like in the insides of the business part of it, it seemed like you were starting to see the beginnings of we're bouncing off the bottom. So you were seeing the small money, like the people that invest in the very early starts of projects and studios and that, starting to come out of the shadows again. But then this year seems shakier than ever. I mean, the reason why we have live service, so many live services, is because a successful live service, a Fortnite, makes all the money. And Microsoft and EA and Ubisoft and Sony and all these companies would be perfectly happy. In fact, they would be more happy if they had each had 5 live services that made all the money and no other games. But we don't want that. I don't think anyone who plays games really wants the industry to look like that. But from a business perspective, that'd be awesome. You know that you're going to have 5 games that you only have to worry about 5 games at your publishing organization, and then one will start to slowly decline, and then you go and you start the hunt for the one that's going to replace it as it eventually dies. I don't want the industry to look like that. And I kind of feel like maybe people are starting to signal with their wallets that they don't want it to look like that either.
Sure.
I think Clair Obscura in a lot of ways is a strong signal, because it's a game made pretty cheaply with good but not over good visuals. And people are like, I mean, it didn't sell 15 million copies, but it sold great. I mean, I guess we'll see. Maybe, you know what?
You never know, right? Until the publisher speaks.
Every time I talk, as I'm talking, I can just see like the GTA 6 logo like rising out of this fog in the back of my mind. I think that's going to be what decides. Honestly, ask me again after GTA 6 ships. Because
it's so rapidly evolving, right? It's tough to say. It's tough to say.
If GTA 6 doesn't sell 70, 80 million copies or whatever GTA 5 sold, then that's going to signal something. But if it's basically, if it's the most successful launch of all time, we'll see.
Get ready for more.
Yeah. And I mean, we're seeing, I don't know. Are we seeing, is this the last console? Is this the peak console? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not Michael Pachter, but he might be right.
Sure. We talked a little bit at the very start of this of your experience with the Sonic team. You love the small team, getting to know everyone. I've argued, and it's more like armchair game deving, to be completely honest, but I've argued that I feel that is a lot of this industry's future. A lot of these, it seems, veteran developers continue to flee from these big studios, these prominent names, to go start their own adventures because they want to have that control back. They want to know their team. They want to have that bond, that kinship. Do you see that maybe being the future as well? I mean, again, you used Expedition as an example, and while they outsourced a lot of their work, as any company does, it's a 30-ish person team that's kind of like they're building the framework, if you will, of what Expedition is, ideating and everything like that. Do you view that as a potential future for the industry? Because the problem I have is I'm like, well, yeah, this game makes money. And I think for me, I would not sit here and be upset if anything I saw and made or someone else made, 3 million copies. I would never scoff at that. But there are publishers that do. I always wonder the difference between like greed and also just like how much is enough. So what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, line must go up. If you're a publicly traded company, and I think that some of the ills of the industry are the fact that so many of the major publishers are publicly traded, and the line has to go up, and line has to go up quarter to quarter even. And this is dev times have gotten longer, and that makes it harder. 3 million. Yeah, I mean, if I made something with 30 people and sold 3 million copies, I'd be ecstatic. But I mean, that's $100-ish million.
Sure.
EA talked about having billion-dollar franchises. Back in 2015, they were talking about that.
Mhm.
So the problem is, if you go and you want to have $100 million franchises, you need 10 times as many to have the same amount of revenue. Uh,
Yeah.
and there are good arguments for actually maybe that's better. Maybe that's more. And actually, EA back in 2009, 2010 kind of looked more like that. They had a
Hmm.
lot more games, but you're a lot less shaky, right? If you ship 3 games a year and one of those games stumbles, that's a third of your revenue. If you
Yeah.
ship 30 games a year, then like if 5 of them stumble, it's less. That's
Mm.
so like it's
Mm.
there's something to be said for that. So I don't know. I mean, we've seen a lot of studios started by people who left AAA companies, BioWare, but others as well, who got investment, big investment, and then this year, late last year, they're gone. Their
Mm.
money went away. Um, but I think that Clair Obscur again maybe is the way, because they had external investment. I can't remember from who, but I think it was less. They were less dependent on that, and um, so maybe that's the promise. I mean,
Yeah.
or maybe it's just like, maybe we'll just have a rebuilding period. Maybe it'll be really long, and maybe we'll
Yeah.
get like a bunch of indie people who over the next 5 years grow into double A, and then that's what will form the next triple A.
Yeah, interesting. Because like in my experience with game pitching, I've found that a lot of the, by the way, I've only strictly pitched to indie publishers, but a lot of it's equally like, I think what happens is the top level things with AAA have deceived a lot of people. That I think what folks don't realize is, even though these indies are making a lot of money, it's equally tight down there. I mean,
Yeah,
as I kind of described earlier, I use Balatro as an example, like a game that is fantastic, but a game that likely wasn't very expensive. Is one developer, and it goes on to sell 4 or 5 million copies at $15 a pop. Like, that's what all these indie publishers I found just continue to hunt for, is like, can
right.
our Balatro.
I
And so they don't want to take any risks. And I always worry about, a risk averse industry and sort of what that means, because then me as a developer, like, we're not making a Balatro style game, but I get that quiet voice in me that sometimes feels incentivized to go chase something smaller, safer, that we can do in a year, and shove off to a publisher that might be like, this isn't high risk. But I'm like, that
yeah.
feels so backwards. That's not how it
No, I get what you're saying, and I do think that's where we're at right now.
Mm.
And I think what we might see is, things that are funded. What I'm starting to maybe see is maybe money coming into the industry from um, weird places. So, I mean, I'm in Alberta, and there's a lot of oil money floating around in Alberta, and you know, maybe there are some of those people that are like, okay, well, this can't go on forever, and
Mm.
so maybe you start to get a little bit of, now this is not AAA. This is maybe in the early dev indie space. Maybe you start to get a few things happening there. I don't know. It's it's
Yeah.
it's rough right now.
Yeah. You kind of have to just take your check wherever you can get it
Yeah,
at this point,
exactly.
because there's just such little options available and so
And
few willing to take a chance.
and people don't do, and yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, people don't do the math. It's like, okay, so right, so Balatro sold 5 million copies at $15, but I mean, they're only getting basically 10 of that.
Mm.
So like, that's $50 million. That's great, but marketing, and like, it's like it goes doesn't it
It goes
doesn't
quick.
it goes quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just interesting to get a veteran's thoughts on just sort of where we're at when it comes to
It,
the economy of gaming. I appreciate the insight on that.
yeah,
Let's jump a bit into Veilguard a bit. This is a game that's just had a lot of conversation around it. So just as someone who's been with the franchise since the beginning, and then you, if correct me if I'm wrong, you executive produced on this?
I was executive producer on the Joplin part, and then for like a year on, I guess we'll call it the Morrison part,
Mm,
after Anthem shipped. Yeah.
got it. Okay. So yeah, you've seen this thing transform, grow, change, evolve, whatever word you want to throw in there. Um, did you have any worries when this game was going out into the wild? If there's anything you could have changed, given how things have gone, would you have changed anything at all, or do you kind of find a valuable lesson learned in all of it?
Yeah, I mean, Veilgard is 4 games stitched together, and you can really see the stitching. Probably the best thing that could have happened, well, assuming that EA was going to prioritize Anthem over Dragon Age, which I think I don't think there's a universe in which that doesn't happen. Assuming that happens, probably the one single act that would have made a massive difference to Veilgard would have been to shut the project down completely when I moved on to Anthem. Because it's carrying a lot of the weight of being that live service game in that period, like running without an executive producer, and it's just like it picked up a lot of stuff that is still in there. It's still part of the end result of the game, in part because it was always essentially a year and a half away from ship. From that moment on, it was always in this constant state of being too close to its ship date to really completely retool. When the Mass Effect people came on to Veilgard, they stopped completely. Like, they was like, yeah, we're gonna be on Dragon Age, and we're not gonna let this zombie project continue on its own without its leadership. We will only work as much on Mass Effect as the executive producer can pay attention to. And that's what we should. That's the one thing that absolutely would have made a massive difference. Now, there's a non-zero chance that Anthem ships and we go to try to start the Dragon Age up from a cold start, and EA goes, no, we don't want it anymore. So
that's survival again. Yeah.
So maybe you don't get a Dragon Age. Maybe you don't get a Dragon Age 4 at all in that world, but you're not carrying that baggage in that case.
The project would have stood a better chance to be its own thing rather than inheriting so many different ideas from people who may not even been there anymore.
So much of, I mean, there's not a lot of Joplin in Veilgard, but there's a lot of Morrison in Veilgard. In like art style, tone. I mean, a lot of that is where, like, a lot of that is multiplayer, live service stuff, and it was like worked away. It was worked on, but that was the base.
Right. Yeah. Are you able to speak to the tone a little bit? Because I know that was in Schreier's report a bit, but as someone who, again, been there since the start of this franchise, you look at Origins and you look at Veilgard, and I think it's fair to say kind of night and day in most instances. I do think of one part of Veilgard, which was like a conversation you had with Morgan toward the end of the game, where I was like, oh, this is like exactly what I think Dragon Age is. How do you feel about the tone of the game and sort of how it's changed dramatically since the original?
One thing to remember with, like, if you think about the example I use is the Thor movies. So Dark World came out right around Inquisition. I think it's before Inquisition, and people were like, ugh. And then Ragnarok came out in when did it come out? But it came out like early in Dragon Age 4's development. And so that was like the height of the sort of like love with this brighter, quippier sort of tonal landscape from traditionally very dark IPs. But we got a lot of years to go. And by the time, I mean, if you continue down Thor, Love and Thunder comes out before Veilgard ships as well. And that's basically, if we pretty much can use Thor as plotting the we love this to we hate this with a burning passion. So the game was in development for so long that that like it basically it's kind of almost out of place in time in terms of its tone.
Sure.
Alternatively, this is something that's been bubbling in my head is alternatively, there's a game missing in between the two of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's the other possibility, is that there's a game, Joplin, that slots in between Anthem or Inquisition and Veilguard and bridges the gap. Maybe that's the
Gives
other
you time
possibility.
to reassess as well, less
Yeah,
baggage from project to project.
yeah,
Yeah, very
maybe.
ideal. But I was
Yeah,
just curious to get your thoughts on that, just given the shift there, because Marvel was a big comparison, that Marvel
it
style writing.
it wasn't Marvel on purpose, but it was definitely drawing from that zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And so it was very Marvel-y,
Mm.
and it also was living with the consequences of people not really wanting that
Yeah.
anymore.
And did you, just to my question about, worrying, and I know you said like just shutting it down probably would have been the better option, but did you have any concerns about that tone going in? Because I know that first trailer in 2024 in the summer was kind of like the moment of like the switch flip for a lot of people. I kind of just worried. It's like, no, I just think at the time I was like, I think it's just like a bad trailer. When I played the full game, I went, oh, it's the whole game. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, I actually really like that trailer.
Okay.
But it also is accurate, and it is accurate to
It is, yeah.
So it's kind of like,
that's true.
It kind of, and that trailer was around for a long time in various forms. Like, it had been developed, like it was definitely polished up and made shippable, but it had been around in some form or other for quite a long time. Which, again, maybe it was a better trailer in 2020 than it was in 2024. Maybe it was less. Maybe it fit into the cultural conversation better 4 or 5 years earlier.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I don't think a lot of people consider. And I never, until I started writing something myself, I was like, you kind of have to think about that timeline where when you start writing something, it's usually inspired by a thing that happens now. But you have to remember there's like this 4 or 5 year run where that thing that you feel is very important to be said might have been even said by someone else or oversaid by someone else by the time it comes around. And then you just feel out of touch. You're like, oh, I know how we got here. And it's like, yeah, it's got to be a little scary. Especially with you guys, you've had such long development cycles at BioWare.
Yeah. Well, and this one is, I don't think anyone should be doing 10 years between games.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I cover a lot of Bethesda stuff, and that's the problem that I find them to be in right now. I'm like, I don't know. I say it with all the love of my heart because I do like their games a lot, but I'm like, I don't know a world where Elder Scrolls 6 lives up to Skyrim. Like, it's just almost impossible by the time we get there, 15 plus year gap.
Yeah, because we're 14 years now, so
yeah, just unbelievable. Couple more questions for you, just on the note of working on so many games. I feel like every project comes with its lessons that you learn from it. For you, I mean, again, you ship so much that I wonder how you think about these things when they do go out into the wild. Were there any lessons that you felt you as a creative or producer, like what did you learn from the process of Veilgard going out into the wild and just looking at how things go?
Yeah, I mean, Veilguard's a tough one for me. I don't know that doing what I did, which is leading a project, leaving, and then coming back as a part-time consultant, is an experience that I would recommend to anyone.
Sure.
It's like you move from driving the car to sitting in the trunk of the car, trying to shout directions through the firewall. So that, I mean, I learned that lesson, I guess. It did actually solidify. I think Veilgard is not a perfect game. So like, it's got lots of problems.
Sure.
But I think that some of its reception could have been mitigated by a more open conversation with the potential player base.
Got you.
Which I've always believed in.
Yeah, of course.
And I just think that anytime you surprise your players, I guess negatively surprise. I guess positive surprises can be good, but any negative surprise is going to end up being way worse.
Yeah.
any kind of negative fallout that you would get from coming out with that information earlier.
Understandable. On that note, because you mentioned going back part-time and consulting, what pulled you back to the project? I don't know if you've spoken on this before. I might have missed it, but what
Yeah,
made you like
I mean,
leave and you're like, I'm done, and then come back and you're like, like what pulled you back in?
so I mean that's what I do now is I help projects
Sure.
mostly
Okay.
with their process and getting themselves ready to be the kind of studio or team that can ship a game. Because you'd be
Okay.
surprised, well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised actually, but a lot of teams are really good at starting games and not so good at shipping them. And
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
good at shipping games. So that's basically what I do. So part of me was like, okay, I'm doing this. Dragon Age just hit alpha when they hit alpha in 2022. I was like, okay, they've hit alpha. Maybe I can help them. And I reached out, and they basically said no. And then a couple people left, and then they said, okay, actually, yes. So it was fitting into the business that I was already doing, the work I was already doing. But also, I mean, I've been the person in charge of the franchise for most of its existence.
Sure.
So it felt at the time like I wanted to be involved. Looking back in retrospect, I don't know if that was actually the right call for myself. But that was my thinking at the time.
Sure. It's your baby at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
On shipping a game, that's a interesting touchstone as well. I like to try to when people speak in kind of like more game dev terms, I like to try to bring that context to the forefront because like for example, when I watch interviews, like a lot of devs go like game development's hard, and like I think many of us know and understand that, many have experienced it, but I think a lot of people need the context of like from your perspective. You're like how to start a game, but shipping a game. What for you is that process of shipping a game, as in like do you come in and you're just drawing the finish lines across all these departments, like yep you're good, like what do you do to help get that game out?
The biggest thing for me is it's very easy for a team to get stuck in the middle where they're like, I've made a level and now we're just kind of we're shoving content in it, but it's not really looking any better, it's just kind of getting bigger. And so the thing that needs to happen is you need to get something to shippable. Like I, as the person in charge of the project or the team as a whole, would be like, if this went out right now, we'd be like, okay, we're fine with that. And then once you can, even almost agnostic of what that thing is, that can serve as a seed crystal, and then the rest of the game kind of can crystallize around that. But what teams that get stuck in the middle often do is they never want to ever allow that initial crystal to form. So everything is almost done. But if everything is almost done, nothing's actually done. And often the act of finishing something is like, okay, this is almost done, but we haven't hooked up the final sounds, or this is almost done, but the performance isn't there, or this is almost done, but the balance isn't right, or all of those things. Is that what you realize as you start that process? Is there's a bunch of things that you forgot about, or that are hiding behind that. It's like, oh, right, we need to hook up the final sounds. Oh, now we're blowing memory. Oh, then we need to work on the optimization. And now it turns out we have too many creatures in this combat, so we have to pull out 3 creatures. Now we've thrown the balance out of whack, so now we got to rebalance the entire combat. Oh no, now the level feels unpopulated because we had to pull out 25% of the creatures. So now we got to put some more props in, and it's like as you start that process, it's not that it's hard, but it's more work than people think it's going to be.
Got it.
So they put it off, and then you just kind of have to do it. You just kind of have to start. And someone's got to say at some point, this is why I advocate triage. Triage is basically just the process of looking at the bugs, and in the case of BioWare, bugs means basically everything. Like, I don't like what this hat looks like is a bug, alongside this crashes. But you look at the bugs and you decide when, you know what, the hat's fine. We're just going to ship the hat like that. Like, eventually, every game contains at least one bug. Every game could have one extra piece of content. And at some point, you got to say, nope, no more.
So you kind of have to bring in my experience, I found like a lot of artists, for example, struggle with perfectionism. Like they just want to keep
Yeah.
going and keep tinkering and keep polishing. You have to serve as like the pair of scissors, like, it's good. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. There's gotta be somebody. That's why somebody's got to ultimately land the plane. And it's great. You know what? You kind of want your artists to be like, I could make this look better. Just just give me 2 more hours, coach, and I'll make it look better. You kind of almost want that. You don't want them to be like, meh, whatever, good enough.
True.
But someone's got to do it. So if they can't do it, and in some ways you don't necessarily even want them to do it, somebody's gotta, and that's gotta be you. And you gotta say like, well, not me in the case of Veilgard, but somebody's got to say enough is enough. We're shipping this.
And that kind of requires familiarity of all trades, doesn't it? To kind of know when done is done. Or
Yeah, you
enough is
got to
enough.
be able to. It's a big act of synthesis. So I did it through. I did it mostly through triage by experiencing the game mostly through the bug list itself. Like you're almost like hooking yourself up to the bug list like it's the Matrix and absorbing it that way. Other people do it by very actively playing the games themselves. Other people do it through dailies. Like you're going to all sit down as a group and we're going to play through this level all together and we're going to basically talk through what is good, what we're changing. And if we don't mention it in the meeting, we're not doing it. All of those things can work. But something's got to happen. Eventually, you got to basically, at some point, you got to take a piece of content and say, unless it crashes, we're done with this thing.
Very interesting. Great insight there. I guess on that note, then, perfect way to round this out is your channel. A lot of it is built around giving advice to aspiring game developers based on your experience. So if there were 3 things that you could make sure any up and coming game developer could hear, especially nowadays, I feel like people need to hear this stuff, not just because of the tremendous insight you bring, but also I feel like when you're looking at like, oh, there was an article I saw come out from Mobile Gamer. It's like AI tools are replacing jobs at King. It's like, I feel like people need to hear, like you're still needed also. What would those things, those pieces of advice, if there are 3 that they have to hear this, what would those be?
Number 1 is finish more things. So one of the very first videos I ever did on my channel was about making more pots, the parable of the pots, which is, you get better by making more things. So don't keep noodling on that character level design, whatever. Make another one. Make 10 more. And then if you want to, go back and decide that first one you made is a piece of garbage and throw it out and start again. But don't keep noodling on the first one. You will learn more and get better by making 10 than you will by continuing to work on the first one. That's the number 1 thing. That is everyone. I'll someday just hire a billboard to say that, because that is the number 1 thing that hurts the game industry. If it's not in the, I guess number 2 related, if it's not in the game, it's not real. You gotta integrate it into the game so that you. I just made a video, which I haven't even posted yet, which is game dev is a conversation. You're talking with the game itself. So if you need to make something, put it into the game, and then let the game talk back to you to tell you what it needs, where it needs to go from there. If you're just shoving content into the game as fast as you can without pausing to fix bugs, without pausing to look at what you're getting, you're not making a game. You're making a big problem for yourself later when you try to finally make it be a game. And then you're going to have to basically deal with that in reverse if you do that. On AI, oof. The thing that I'm worried about with AI is this. I guess this is more a message for people who are starting their own studios and thinking about using generative AI. Is the problem that I see we're going to have is that I do think that generative AI is going to be able to replace a lot of junior people pretty soon. Maybe not as good as a junior people, but like replace them kinda. But the problem with that is that in 5 years, after that starts to happen, you're not going to have any seniors. because all the people who are seniors now will leave, and you haven't hired any juniors and turned them into seniors. And if the industry becomes that industry, either the generative AI tools are going to have gotten good enough to replace seniors, which doesn't seem likely to me, or we're going to be in a real world of hurt as we look around and say, well, where's my lead writer at? Where's my art director at? Where's my creative director at, or my lead designer at? And it's like, oh wait, it's just a field of AI tools because everyone else left. I'm really worried about that the industry is going to hollow itself out in the next couple of years. We're seeing it happening. We're seeing juniors start to get replaced by generative AI tools. And they can't do a bunch of stuff yet. But they can do some stuff, and I don't know. Someone's going to do it. Like, I'm not saying, I guess I'm not saying someone's going to do it, so you might as well. But someone's going to do it. And I don't know that. My feeling is that the general game playing public doesn't care that much if the game is made with generative AI. There's definitely a vocal group that cares. I care. But I don't know that. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think that someone's going to make a generative AI game that's like 80% generative art and generative code and it's using ChatGPT to generate dialogue. And the problem is that game doesn't have to be a 10 million seller, because if that game gets made for $500,000 and sells 1 million copies, that might be good enough. People might be like, oh, look, I can make, like, that's what I'm really worried about. It's not I'm going to make the next game of the year with generative AI. It's that I can make 650 mediocre AI slot games for $4 each and flood the market.
Yeah, because we're already experiencing that market flood with just like cheap asset flips. Like, that's the current thing right now. And I think it's gonna, you'd hope responsible storefronts will kind of step up, and at least in the case of Valve, they're like, hey, on Steam, please, you have to label it or else. But in the case of, I've said, my friend Colin Moriarty brought it to my attention that the PlayStation Store is a complete mess. Like, it's just constantly
absolutely. I saw that
destroyed.
I saw that today with the wordplay by Mark. He was like listing all of the AI asset flip things that were there instead of his game. And it's like, yeah, it's already happening. I mean, I'm on YouTube, and like, it's not that I watch a bunch of AI slop, like some AI voice reading off a Reddit post videos, but they keep showing up in my feed.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. So it's definitely an uneasy time, no doubt about it. But Mark, man, absolutely incredible conversation. I appreciate you so much. Appreciate what you do for this industry. Your channel is excellent. Again, I'll have it linked down below, but it's Darrah on Games. Mark, before we go, any final words, any final thoughts, anything you want to shout out, anything like that at all?
I would just say that, if you're someone who is interested in video game development, I would check my channel out. Even if you're not looking to get into game development, there is, say, at least 1 out of 10 of my videos is probably still going to be interesting to you. So I would say give it a look.
Highly recommended. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, please check out his channel, link down below. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next conversation. Stay sexy, stay active. Love you all.